Hello, good morning. My name is Karen Shell. I'm going to be providing to you some videos from the United States and from myself for sleep medicine and respiratory care. A little bit about me. I think probably some of you have probably seen part of this video before during a presentation I gave last fall for those interested in sleep, but I wanted to let you know that this particular presentation is following the curriculum or agenda that your teachers have set to me for lectures regarding sleep apnea and respiratory care, sleep medicine and respiratory care. As I said, my name is Karen. I am a retired educator from KU Med Center in Kansas City, Missouri. KU Med Center is a medical university, and we have provided respiratory care, a bachelor's in respiratory care there for over 40 years. Sleep is really a major role for respiratory therapists. We're the eyes and ears at the bedside for our physicians to identify those at risk for sleep disorders. Sleep really became one of my passions and early in my career as I opened a sleep lab as part of my department in the hospital I was working at and held accreditation there until I left to teach in 2015. So before we get started, I'm sure your teachers have gone over the curriculum, and I will be providing guest lectures for each week of the curriculum and hope that you enjoy my presentations. As I promised, a little bit about me. I am a respiratory therapist. I have been a respiratory therapist since 1987 when I started in respiratory school at Washburn University. I have since then completed my bachelor's degree and my master's degree and my doctorate degree. And currently, I'm retired. I just turned 68 this last year, and felt like it was time for me to step back and let the younger generation get a hold. My experience is really very wide and varied. I have worked in respiratory since, like I said, 1987 as a student. I actually went to respiratory school as after working in respiratory as an OJT and realizing I needed to have more education to do the things I was doing. I was very active in the Kansas Respiratory Care Society, serving as president a couple years and on the board many years, and helped in getting licensure in Kansas. I also am past president of the American Association of Respiratory Care. My term just ended last December. And I've been involved in the American Lung Association, the American Sleep Society, Kansas Sleep Society, and other volunteer activities in which we started respiratory school in Ghana, Africa. I am married and have 3 grown children. Have lived in Kansas all my life, and currently in a small town in northern Kansas. It's where I'm talking to you from now. I'm currently in my home office, which is an old building that was built in the 1890s, so kind of a place for me to feel comfortable and talk to you about sleep. If you have any questions about my experience, your educator has a CV that you can look at. My work, I worked as a respiratory therapist starting as a student and progressed up to a manager of a 6 different departments in a local hospital until I went to teach at KU in 2015. Just a quick review of the course, Sleep Medicine and Respiratory Care. Your teachers have sent me the course outcomes, and they're listed here on this slide. And hopefully by the end of this course, we'll be able to do all 6 of these objectives. You'll find these in your course plan. I'm sure you have a copy of that by now. And we'll continue to meet these objectives throughout the semester in various lectures as we cover the lesson plan. So again, look at your lesson plan, and we'll try to keep you updated as we move along. As I stated earlier on the previous slide, I have been provided a curriculum from your educators. It's specifically what you wish to get from this course in sleep medicine. And according to the course outcomes, it's divided into 6 different outcomes. So this week, I'm going to be covering 2 different lectures. The first one will be over the history of sleep medicine, both in the United States and in India. And the second lecture, a second recording, will be on the biology of sleep. The first presentation will be available for you on the 16th of January, and the second on the 17th of January. I will be sending a preview of these videos to your teachers the week prior before, and they will be recorded so that you can go back through them and review them as you go along. Of course, in an hour's time, it's hard to define all the information you need. I will be providing references on each slide, references on each presentation that feel free to look up and read more about. Additionally, I will be providing a short quiz at the end of each presentation to see that you understood the information that was presented. And of course, I'm available by email at any time. So let's get started with the first week presentation for the 16th, which covers the objectives of history of sleep medicine, in which I'm going to explain the history or timeline of events of sleep, both in the United States and India. As I explained earlier, I will be reviewing and following the syllabus or the agenda that your teachers has sent me for this presentation. Some of the information you receive on this presentation was also presented last fall during a presentation provided to you on sleep medicine for those of the interested in sleep. So this may be a repeat of some information, but I think it would be good for you to go ahead and review it as you can. Okay, here we go. Here's our first objective for this presentation, to explain the timeline of important events in the history of sleep medicine. Okay, before we jump into the important events of sleep medicine, I want to just remind everyone about sleep itself. That we know that sleep isn't just a timeout. It affects our lifestyle, it affects our workforce, especially those who work 24/7, and kids, and our work life, and our home life. So I think it affects, we have to realize that sleep affects all forms of health. And RTs have been put in respiratory therapists have been put in a unique position or opportunity that we are at the bedside a lot to take care of our patients. And we can do a lot of assessment, a lot of education, and bring those skills that we have learned in school to the bedside to help our patients lead a better lifestyle. In the coming weeks, we're going to give you some simple tools that will help you assess patients for possible sleep disorders. But let's talk a little bit about sleep itself. We know that there's 88 disorders of sleeping and waking that lead to lowered quality of life and affects our personal health, not only our physical health, mental health, and our family life. It's estimated that 35% of Americans have trouble falling or staying asleep. And the number of people with sleep disorders is somewhere over 70 million just in America alone. Common sleep disorders include narcolepsy, insomnia, and sleep apnea, and we'll go into detail on each of these later on during the semester. Sleep deprivation and undiagnosed sleep disorders make up one of America's most serious health problems, as we suspect it does worldwide. And history of sleep research in India itself is older than the history of modern sleep medicine, and all Indian Institute Medicine's AIMS was established in 1956 with the focus on sleep research. We'll go into that a little bit later as well. What is sleep? Well, we know that sleep is a physiological behavior that is common to all animal species. We know that it is a regular pattern. We know that we have to catch up on sleep or catch up on sleep debt. We'll discuss those a little bit deeper and later in the semester. We know we spend about a third of our life in sleep, and we're not quite sure, it's not real clear what functions of sleep are essential for survival. But we do know that prolonged sleep deprivation leads to severe physical impairment, followed by cognitive and loss cognitive loss, and eventually death. So it's required for the survival or the long life of a person. We know that sleep is a state where awareness to the environment is reduced. Sleep is different from the stages of coma, hibernation, and death by the fact it can be rapidly diversed. We know that there's different stages of sleep or different amounts of sleep required for different ages of individuals during sleep. Sleep duration varies amongst individuals, and the usual amount is 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. But some individuals can function well on less than 6 hours per night, and others may take up to 12 hours of sleep. When we look at the ages of individuals, we know that preschool children ages 3 to 5 years old require 10 to 12 hours of sleep. Those of school age, 6 to 12 years of age, require 9 to 12 hours of sleep. Teenagers 13 to 18 years of age need 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and an adult we know needs more than 7. Now, this is an average for each individual. It can be different for individuals. It just depends a lot on the individual itself. Okay, let's get into a little bit of the history of sleep and where research actually began, or where we first were aware of it. We know that in the early Indian, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans all described sleep in different ways, or various ways, including the gods who brought dreams to their sleepers. In 450 BC, the Greek physician postulated that sleep was a spell of unconsciousness brought on by the lack of circulation to the brain because of blood draining from the body's surface. In 400 BC, it was thought that the drop in the surface temperature of a sleeping person caused the sleep. And then 50 years later, Aristotle commented that sleep was an arrest of consciousness in the heart, which at the time was thought to be the seat of sense and sensibility, so it would last longer. He connected the digestive system to the onset of sleep as well. In 162 AD, it was identified by Galen that rather than the heart, that the seat of consciousness was the brain. So over the 1600 years following, little progress was made in the understanding of the nature of sleep. And it's important to note that sleep was thought to be a detoxifying process, one which shut down some of the body mechanisms or being brought on by the lack of blood. And we know today that's not true. During the 1800s, which was the age of enlightenment, some science experts started the practice of interpreting their own dreams. The bedroom slowly became a place of sleep and sexual intimacy alone, and sleep itself became regulated. By the 1800s, excessive sleep was regarded as a mark of slothfulness. In the 1900s, neurons were discovered to be the individual units of the nervous system. 1903 marked the formulation of the first sleeping pill, barbiturate. Within 30 years, it became one of the most abused drugs in the United States. An even more memorable discovery was the discovery of circadian rhythms in the body. In 1911, Henry Perron et al. Found that sleep-deprived animals apparently secreted a sleep-inducing molecule into their cerebrospinal fluid, which could make alert dogs fall into a deep sleep when ejected. It was termed hypotoxin. 2 years later, he published the first book to attempt to deal with the physiological of sleep. And then another physician studied patients with encephalitis who displayed sleep abnormalities and identified the region of the brain called the hypothalamus as the center of sleep and wake activity. This was in 1916, and the following years it was continued to be studied. In 1924, the EEG was invented. However, the differential brain electrical waves during sleep and wakefulness were discovered during this process. And around this time, stimulants began to be used to promote wakefulness for narcolepsy patients. The 1930s brought in another researcher a German researcher called Bunning. He recognized the existence of a biological clock and found that it was inherited in each species. Just 2 years later, a team of Loomis, Harvey, and Hobart discovered 5 stages of sleep and named the brainwaves characteristic to each as alpha, low voltage spindles, spindle plus random, and random waves. And the structure of sleep, as we know today, was being unveiled at this time. In 1939, Clayton's Sleep and Wakefulness was published, which covered many years of sleep research, sleep disorders, temperature changes during sleep, and sleep-wake cycles. Further work was established in the role of the brainstem in skeletal muscle relaxation during sleep, which advanced the understanding of the neurophysiology of sleep. Further, in the 1953, REM sleep was first detected in a young boy, which really startled the researcher because it contradicted the general impression that brain activity dropped to a low during sleep, where REM proved to be that brain activity increased. The next year, they found that nighttime sleep consists of several repeating cycles of different stages of sleep. And then in 1958, melatonin was discovered and proved to be the key in regulating sleep. In 1959, REM and non-REM sleep was distinguished by Michael Jouvet. He found that the former was not light sleep, but paradoxal sleep, with increased brain activity being accompanied by skeletal muscle inhibition, which prevents the body from acting out the vivid images and sounds and dreams experienced during REM. In non-REM sleep, this inhibition is not seen and brain activity is low. In that same year, circadian rhythms were named as such by Halbert, who identified and studied them in the humans for the first time, thus becoming the father of chronobiology. This slide kind of demonstrates the progression of sleep understanding and sleep research. As we noted, in 1875, the first steps discovery in the electrical activity of the brain. Then in 1937, non-REM sleep, vertex wave sleep, spindles, K-complexes, and delta slowing showed up. In 1953, REM sleep was described, and it was correlated to the dreaming hypothesis. In 1957, the human sleep cycle of non-REM sleep stages of increasing depth followed by periods of REM sleep using the 4 stages of non-REM sleep and REM sleep were described and put into practice. Moving into the 60s, in 1962, it was discovered that the PONS regulates the REM sleeps, that obstructive sleep apnea became the poster boy of sleep medicine, and changes were described and studied in detail with the connection of sleep and awakening. And then in 1965, it extended to the systemic study of temperature, circulatory, breathing changes during sleep. In the 60s, parasomnias and bedwetting were identified to be products of confusional awakening and from slow wave sleep rather than from REM sleep. In a paper by Roger Brochen, the following decade saw the setting up of the first sleep research center at Stanford University in 1970 that identified the genetic physical locus or suprachiasmatic nucleus for the circadian rhythms and the evolution of a reliable sleepiness measure such as the multiple sleep latency test. Again, we're going to cover those a little bit deeper as we progress through the semester. The 1980s bring us the connection between circadian rhythm and the duration of sleep, as well as other cues in sleep. This relationship between sleep and learning was studied. The absolute physiological necessity of sleep for life was finally confirmed. Molecular biology started to play a major role in the field, and the most authoritative book on sleep medicine, The Principles and Practice of Sleep Medicine, was published in 1989. The 1990s brings more research and more things to study about sleep. So in the 90s, we saw the emergence of working theories of sleep, including the neural group theory and the brain energy metabolism theory. The so-called sleep switch in the ventrolateral preoptic area was also identified by Saber and his team. We also saw the deficiency of orexin receptor, which is a molecule whose absence produces a narcolepsy. It was also discovered during this time. Van Cotter and his group of researchers also started to explore the effects of sleep deprivation on carbohydrate metabolism and the role of light and myeloglobin, which is a retinal pigment, in setting the biological clock, was also uncovered, thereby shedding the fascinating light upon this process of sleep regulation. In 2003, researchers proposed that the sympathetic homeostasis theory, which stated sleep allowed synapse networks to recuperate during sleep and the activation level to conserve their strength. Sleep deprivation was also studied, and the risk of poor judgments were studied with the data published. Models were also developed following these discoveries to look at the activation synthesis model to explain the dreams apart from psychoanalytical and supernatural explanations. These models also provided information on sleep stage switching, such as REM to non-REM alterations. As we can see, that sleep research and sleep education has evolved. We first noticed narcolepsy in the 1880s. We started to notice excessive daytime sleepiness in the combination with cataplexy and narcolepsy. REM commenced near sleep onset in narcoleptic patients rather than 1 or 2 hours later in the normal sleep. And then restless leg syndrome was described 50 years ago, and it is one of the most common sleep disorders. Over the last 70 years, sleep research and sleep science has had some major changes and major advances. We know that sleep medicine emergence began. There was a specialty of sleep disorders and sleep sciences. REM sleep was discovered in the 1950s, and major advances in sleep science at that time. We also know that scientific progress, increasing recognitions of disorders of sleep, led physicians to acquire knowledge necessary to diagnose and treatment of sleep disorders. And over the last quarter of a century, the history of sleep medicine has developed immensely. The ICSD, or the International Classification of Sleep Disorders, has 88 sleep-related disorders listed. And we know that insomnia affects everyone occasionally. We know that 1 out of 3 adults have a significant problem with sleep. Snoring, obstructive sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome are all part of that international classification of sleep disorders. We're going to cover some of those in depth, and if you're interested in all the disorders, you can take a look at the international classification of sleep disorders and see there's a wide variety of different disorders, plus the continuing research going on with each of those. Some of the research and continuing research in sleep science includes the circadian rhythms, the science of sleep and circadian rhythms and how they affect performance. There's some classic experiments with rats found that the total sleep deprivation resulted in the death of all the rats within 2 to 3 weeks. And then there's a selective deprivation of non-rapid eye movement versus rapid eye movement also resulted in the death of animals over a slightly longer period of time. Over the years, it's been recognized that sleep medicine is an independent area of medical practice, and it's quite complex, and that in order for physicians to be well versed in the diagnosis and treatment of sleep medicine, they need to be well educated in it. So over the last, I guess, many years, the science of sleep medicine has become an independent area of medical practice. I'm sure many of us can relate to this slide as far as the symptoms, and probably many of us have suffered from some form of sleep deprivation in the last year. Excuse me. Some of the symptoms that you can recognize or apply to yourself knowing that you're sleepy include your eyelids feel heavy, hopefully not during this presentation, dozing off while reading, watching TV, or sitting in a meeting, slow thinking and reaction time, difficulty concentrating or understanding directions, forgetfulness, frequent errors or mistakes, poor attentiveness or judgment, sorry, I'm about to lose my voice, or in a complex situation, difficulty in solving problems and moodiness, depression, negativity, irritability, impatience, restlessness. All of these things can be recognized in sleep deprivation. And what do we do about it? So sleep deprivation is highly prevalent. The National Commission on Sleep Disorders Research estimates the U.S. population alone, their sleep time is 20%. And we know from previous slides that it should be 30% or more. We know some of the major accidents that have happened across the world have occurred because of sleep deprivation. We can think of the example of the Exxon Valdez, 3 Mile Island, and when we think of motor vehicle accidents annually due to the drowsiness or fatigue or sleep deprivation. Treatment really does help with sleep, and we're going to go into details some of the treatment options for sleep apnea or sleep disorders or sleep deprivations in the upcoming weeks during the semester. We know if you are better rested, you have less time in bed, your energy can return, weight loss can become easier, your depression improves, concentration improves, and the bedded partner also gets sleep. So again, we're going to go through some different how the treatment of sleep has evolved, as well as the understanding of sleep in the next few weeks. We're now going to move on to the second course outcomes for this week, which includes to outline the important events in the development of sleep medicine and sleep research in India. I'm not from India. In my research of India sleep progression, I have a few details, but I'm sure that you're probably more familiar with some of the traditional religious or information on sleep than I am, but I'll give you a quick outline of what I've found, and hopefully it'll encourage you to search further within your own history about sleep. Okay, the history of sleep medicine in India. What I have found in my limited research of the history of sleep, and I apologize in advance for any mispronunciation of names from the articles I've found. So we know that the knowledge of body function was based on magical, religious, and empirical ideas that were brought to India. And when the Aryans entered the Valley, they brought them the knowledge of gods, medicine, and physiology. One of the individuals I found, Charaka, I believe, gives details of sleep and sleep disorders, quoting that when the mind is tired, the senses are dulled. This was written by Charkara and Sarusha. I probably murdered those pronunciations in 1000 BC. In ancient India, one can find emphasis on deep sleep in the ancient India literature, and the chief sources of knowledge about sleep medicine contain anatomical, physiological, psychological, pathological, and the therapeutic views. In the late 1960s, many of the hospitals and labs around the world, including India, were recording sleep by using polygraphs. The Indian Society of Sleep Research, ISSR, was founded in September of 1992, but the prohibitive cost of polysonographs prevented hospitals and labs from acquiring them, and the hospitals were hesitant to purchase this costly machine as they were not sure about the return. Again, with my limited research in the history of sleep in India, I found that sleep was classified into 7 types on the basis of its causative factors. The goddess of sleep, Nidaria Deva, is invoked to get sleep, was a belief. The second century writings, according to the yogic concept that consciousness is an expression of God and it's very human. And they claim that consciousness through various intermediate states rises to the 5 elements. And these elements bring into existence the universe and all its constitutes. Depending upon its influence, man goes into states of sleep, of dreaming and waking. I did find some statistics from India that were published in November of 2022. Again, these are common statistics that we see worldwide, not just for India, but also for all other parts of countries, especially those countries that are currently researching sleep. So the first one that we look at here is that the research shows that the average person takes 7 minutes to fall asleep. We know that's different with patients with narcolepsy. They can fall right into REM immediately after lying down and relaxing. We also know that electric devices such as TVs, iPhones, gaming programs can affect sleep quality, not only by the brain activating to complete these or watch TV or listen, it's also by the light itself that's emitted from the device, such as with our iPhones looking at email when you're trying to go to sleep, or watching TV while you're going to sleep. In many cases, it's just getting that light stimulus out of the room that helps a person fall asleep faster. We also know, and probably you've been around someone, that snoring really disrupts your sleep, not only for the person sleeping, but possibly for the bed partner. And it really poses a serious health risks such as headaches, heart disease, drop in oxygen level, strokes, and other mental concerns. In my experience running a sleep lab, the snoring can be quite disruptive to the individual, but also because they're constantly waking up to breathe, but also to the bed partner who can't get to sleep because of the snoring. We know that internet overuse is associated with excessive daytime sleepiness. Again, taking your phone to bed or staying on the internet get your brain moving, and it's harder to fall asleep, and so you don't get your adequate amount of sleep or even the deep sleep that's required to regenerate. So internet overuses is associated with excessive daytime sleepiness, and as we look at anxiety as well, disorders are at higher risk of having symptoms of sleep disorders. And as a respiratory therapist, as we move through the semester, your role at the bedside can help determine some of these different sleep habits that can be affecting the person's sleep and help educate the patient on how to get a good night's sleep, along with helping your physician pinpoint if there's a sleep disorder occurring. I also found in going through some of the statistics of India that India is the second most sleep deprived country on the planet, closely ranking to #1 Japan. Per sleep study conductor reports, India lags on sleep, with the average person in around 7 hours and 1 minute of sleep. 55% of the Indian population think they're getting sleep adequately, and 73% want to improve their quality of sleep. Indians get 77 minutes of rapid eye movement, which is the lowest in the world, of rapid eye movement sleep, which is the lowest in the world, and that 51% of the people in India go to sleep between 11 and 1 a.m., and 16% believe they have insomnia. 48% complain of back problems nationwide, and 81% feel sleepy at work at least 1 to 3 days a week. These are pretty significant on how quality of sleep affects your quality of work and your interpersonal relationships as well. So just a few more facts or statistics. I found that Indian users in the age group of 75 to 90 years old got the lowest sleep, and this is common among older adults that they get less sleep on average. It averaged at 6 hours and 35 minutes. 70% of the adults with ADHD take 1 hour trying to fall asleep, and sleep deprivation creates a misbalance in digestive hormones, leptin and ghrelin as well. Again, there's a lot of research being done with the hormonal part of sleep. 75% of people are unable to set off or maintain sound sleep, whereas 30% report a sound sleep. Again, nearly 1 billion adults around the world have mild or severe sleep apnea, and 61% of the people agree that their memory is worse when they do not get sleep, a good sleep. The Indian Sleep Disorders Association was founded in 1995 and is a registered society. It's a body of professional practitioners in sleep medicine, and there was a group of 8 founder members from different states of India that put this idea forward and starting the society at a national level. The office of the society is headquartered in New Delhi. The membership is at large is drawn from various disciplines like internal medicine, pulmonary medicine, neurology, psychiatry, and pediatrics and ENT. The basic aim of the society has been to generate and disseminate the updated knowledge about various sleep disorders amongst medical professionals and the public at large. It helps providing the medical fraternity interested in the field of sleep medicine and is a common platform to discuss and put forward their views. There is a website listed there that you can go to and find out more about this society. It's different from the research society, but it is I guess, growing organization for those interested in sleep medicine. There is a program within the Sleep Society to become a fellow of sleep medicine under the Indian Sleep Disorders Association, ISDA. So if a physician is interested in the study of sleep, there is a credential that is available, and the exam is organized and conducted by the Sleep Disorders Association, and awards the candidate after completion the fellowship, a fellow of sleep medicine. And the aim of this exam is to set a benchmark in the knowledge of the individual conducting sleep, certify it. The certificate really is a testimony that they have the knowledge and are holding that certificate to proof of competence in that discipline, much like in the United States through the AASM. Ask yourself, what can you do as a respiratory therapist in the education of sleep disorders to your peers, colleagues, and your patients? First of all, you've made the first step. You're learning about sleep through a course in your education. You need to be more aware of some of these disorders through your patients. So you need to assess your patients, question your patients, talk to your patients about their sleep or in any of their sleep habits. You need to educate both the patient and the public on the risk of lack of sleep, and promote quality sleep among patients and your colleagues. And last of all, sleep. Get a good night's rest. It's important for all of us to be able to function in our highest ability, and we can't do that without adequate sleep. And I can attest to that because over the years with my job role, it was difficult at times to get enough sleep to be totally at my optimal performance. So again, sleep is important for your health, for your mental state, and for your family at home so that you can care properly for yourself and them. So we've spent the last hour or 45 minutes in discussing the history of sleep and how important it is for a healthy outcome. One of the things that we talk about is some of the habits of sleep. So we need to start looking at the positive side of sleep and how we can make it a habit to get the rest we need. I will tell you we're going to go through some different sleep disorders. We're going to look at the tools that you as a respiratory therapist can use at the bedside to help educate and also assess a patient for any sleep disorders that you can pass on to their physician. I think it's up to you that you make it sleep a habit, a good habit to have. I like this saying by Dr. Seuss. If you're not familiar with him, he writes children's books. But he says you have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself in any direction you choose. So think of yourself as the optimal patient caregiver so that you're giving your patients the best care that's available, and they're, I guess, passing on your understanding of the importance of sleep is one of those tools that you can use to end up having your patient better care. Here is a list of references that I have used for this presentation. Again, there is a lot of reading you can do to add to this presentation for your understanding of the history of sleep. We have a lot to discuss in the next semester, and we're going to work very hard at that. But these are nice references for you to take a little deeper look into some of the information that I have spent with you. The other thing I wanted to do, the next slide has the questions from the lecture that you can answer and turn into your professor. Additionally, I'm going to ask that you start a journal this semester of your sleep, how many hours of sleep you're getting a night, how long you think it took you to fall asleep, how you felt when you got up, and we'll kind of touch base on our live video conferences about that. I think it's important to take a deep look at ourselves as we learn more about sleep and try to improve our own habits. So again, the questions are following on the next slide. Go ahead and answer those and turn them into your, your teacher there on campus. If not, we'll go through them the next week as well. So it's been a pleasure to talk to you. I hope that this was information that you can use in growing yourself to the future, and stay tuned for the next lecture. Thanks.